Welcome, welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Megan, and my amazing co-host is...
Hey, I'm Amanda.
Hello. We are your messy, imperfect homeschool mom friends, kind of like last week where Amanda had tech issues that we didn't discover until it was too late to re-record. So yeah, sometimes we do that. We're sorry about the sound quality of the last episode, but we tested, we did our best. We think we've got it fixed. So hopefully all is well.
Yeah, I still have no idea what went wrong last week. I'm just glad that it seems fixed because I am seriously not tech savvy, right? And restarting my computer and like unplugging and plugging everything back in is about the extent of my tech skills. So hopefully this is fine, right? And anyway, we're here. You're here. We're here. We all made it. And that's what really matters, right? Yay. So if you're new around here, we are a secular, progressive podcast for current and prospective homeschoolers. We believe that everyone is entitled to due process. We believe that just because you get louder doesn't mean you're telling the truth. Looking at you, interview. Trans rights and women's rights are human rights. Separation of church and state is still a really good idea. And like, honestly, so much more. We could do an entire episode on all of the things that are wrong, but we won't. We're going to do an episode about something else.
So much more, right? It's just exhausting. Every day it's like getting hit by a new bus of news media, it's just too much. So if all of our values sound like a breath of fresh air to you in the homeschooling world, where you are constantly trying to fix your face at social events, led by the long denim skirt contingent and the maha trad wives, we've got you. We have a whole community of progressive, like-minded homeschool peeps that can't wait to meet you. And while we are a homeschool podcast, this episode will probably be helpful for way more than just homeschool families, because this week we're talking about ADHD learning hacks. So if you have a kiddo in your home or your family who's ADHD, you might want to forward this episode to your parenting partner, grandparent, babysitter, somebody who helps with after-school homework, anybody you think it might be helpful who's interacting with your kids. Share the wealth.
Yeah, totally. I think that's so true. And a lot of these tips, like even just the idea of thinking beyond kind of like the standard classroom or educational system will really be helpful for anyone who loves a kiddo who has to deal with the world a little bit differently because of these things, whether they're homeschooled or in a brick and mortar school, right? But before we dive in, we like to keep it real around here. And one of the ways that we do that is by giving a glimpse into our lives, the good, bad, the ugly, and, the week leading up to podcast recording. So how are things going in your world, Megan?
Are you sure you want to ask? Right?
It can't be the whole episode. I know it's been bad.
It's been bad, right? Yeah. I can't say a week. I mean, it's been a week since we podcasted, and some of my week was great, right? My kiddo came home from his trip to Greece and Turkey, which was amazing. And we went out for a meal and I got to hear all about his trip and all that. So that stuff was great. I've just had like a really rough 24 hours, right? I mean, anybody who's listened to us on the regular knows that we are doing all sorts of paperwork to change our immigration status and our residency and all this kind of stuff. And like, that's just not easy, right? It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of steps, and there's a lot to do. So we've been in the process of that. And yesterday I went to FedEx here in Hungary and it did not go well. And I did not get to mail the paper that I needed to mail. Today started a 4-day holiday weekend. So that's really bad news. And I ended up ugly crying in an Uber on the way home. So that was yesterday. And I was like, okay, yesterday was my daughter's birthday. So last night we went to Drag Queen Bingo for her birthday. We had a great time. I was like, I'm turning over a new leaf. Things are going to be good. We had a great time. And then something fell and broke, not as a result of us, like it fell off the wall in our Airbnb where we're staying. And our host has been less than understanding about that and somehow seems to think that we intentionally like climbed up on a wall to destroy a light fixture. And I'm like, it just fell down. Like, I didn't install it. I can't tell you what happened. All I can tell you is it scared the crap out of us when it fell. Like, so it's been rough. I cried again today. So there was that. Yeah. So, but it's okay. Afterwards, we went out for sushi to like some all-you-can-eat sushi thing with a bunch of people from the homeschool hub that we're here with. And then we went to the park and yeah, now we're podcasting. I always love podcasting. So like, once I get into it, I'm like, okay, it kind of turns my day around, but sushi in the park definitely turned my day around a little bit too. So I'm just hoping tomorrow like breaks the string of that luck. Like it's got to stop because it's been a rough 2 days. I'm pretty tired.
Yeah.
So how about you?
Well, I mean, I feel kind of like an ass, but things are going pretty well in my corner of the world. So I'm sorry. Yeah, no, things are moving along nicely. Like we said, I'm feeling better. I'm on this new medication, and so that kind of sucks. It's got me a little messed up, but that's not necessarily unusual in my world. Today's a little bit of a crazy day for me. I had a follow-up with my cardiologist this morning, and so I've got a script for another heart monitor, and so that's always good times. We'll have a couple weeks of doing that, and the technology's come a long way. So in some ways that's good, and in some ways that sucks. If you've ever had one, but at least, like it's always good to have the reassurance that your heart's doing what it's supposed to be doing and that there's no concerns there. So we've got that going on. And then as soon as we're done recording, we are jetting off to LA. We're staying at a pretty nice hotel in Hollywood for the night. It's kind of like a combo wedding anniversary trip. And then tomorrow my kiddo has a homeschool field trip. It's a whole behind the scenes tour and something at Warner Brothers Studios. So that should be actually a lot of fun. They produce a lot of shows that we enjoy watching as a family. So I mean, looking forward to that. Tonight we're supposed to do like some kind of a nice dinner on a rooftop in Hollywood and should have some nice views. I can go create my social media if you want to see what that looked like. But yeah, so I'm just, things are okay. Things are good. I'm looking forward to the next couple of days, assuming, we don't get stuck in horrible traffic. Anyone who knows SoCal knows that traffic driving into LA, especially in an afternoon, is a really bad idea, but we're going to give it a go. Okay, so let's dive into our topic for the week, ADHD learning hacks. I don't know. I feel like this could be an entire series for a whole month or something. It could be our version of the Debbie Reaver book, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to talk about, right? And I feel like the statistics aren't complete in the sense that there's probably so many more people homeschooling ADHDers than we even realize. Number one, because we've got so many misdiagnoses. Number two, because diagnoses are so hard to get, right? Number three, because we're not really reporting that in any way. So it's really kind of hard to track. And I am not suggesting that we should start an ADHD registry by any stretch of the imagination, because we seem to be going down that road with autism, and I am not in favor. So I'm not suggesting at this point I want to track anything, because I feel like where it would have been helpful in the past, now it would be used for nefarious purposes. So, but I do feel like within the homeschool community, you just have this massive ADHD population. And so it's definitely something to talk about. And I feel like part of the reason for that is because the typical school setup oftentimes doesn't work for ADHDers. And so you have more and more coming home because parents are realizing that their kiddos just need something completely different. But then they're like, okay, I know they need something different, but what the hell am I supposed to do now? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, let's talk about what ADHD really is. We mentioned at the top about maybe sending this episode to grandparents or something like that, right? So if you're a grandparent who's like, we didn't really have this term when I was younger, and now it seems to be everywhere. What's happening? I mean, that is true. There were plenty of people who had ADHD wiring back in that time frame. It just wasn't diagnosed. It wasn't identified in the same way that autistic people have been around for forever and forever, and it just wasn't identified. Those people were quirky cats or loners or high-spirited, whatever description you wanted to give them. And now we have an actual diagnosis. But ADHD is a lot more than being quirky or high-spirited. It is a brain-based difference in the way that these individuals function, specifically with executive function skills, things like organization and memory and the way they tackle tasks and things like that. It is not an indicator of intelligence. You can have ADHDers across the entire spectrum of intelligence, just like everyone else. It has nothing to do with motivation. That is for sure. But it definitely changes the way people experience the world. It impacts the way they plan things, the way they focus on a particular task or activity, their ability to follow through on certain things. And there's a huge emotional regulation piece to it as well. So oftentimes ADHDers know what to do, but struggle to do those things consistently. And so, Yeah, it is a neurological brain difference. It is not red food dye. It is not crap parenting. It is none of these things. It is a neurological difference.
Yeah, it's truly a difference in the way that your brain is wired. And so like how does that affect learning, right? You see that with attention regulation. It can be hard to focus on boring stuff, but there's this amazing ability to hyper focus on the favorite things. We have all seen this in practice in someone that we know. You can have issues with impulse control. There can be challenges with blurting or interrupting. And a lot of times you will see this like acting before thinking, which again, it can be frustrating for those people who are not wired this way, but they're not doing it to be rude, right? Like it is the way that they're wired. Just like being right-handed or left-handed. Someone doesn't write with their left hand because they want to be difficult. Like they write with their left hand because that's how they're wired. Also have issues with working memory. So this is that piece where you're like, I really feel like they should be able to do 3 or 4 step directions by now, and it's just not happening. Those are working memory issues in practice. You know, there's this extra piece it's a little harder to really put your finger on, but tasks can start to feel overwhelming even when it's something that they really want to do, right? It's all of the moving pieces and the parts and all of the steps. It can just start feeling overwhelming, even if it was their own idea or something they're really interested in and they want to do. And so again, it's this, how does that impact the actual learning? And then Megan mentioned this as well, but that emotional regulation, big feelings, frustration, rejection sensitivity, quick emotional shifts, all of those things can be challenging in an education environment where you're learning, which means you don't know everything, right? You're going to come up against things that you don't know or things that you have to practice or you have to work on. And so these big feelings can make some of that extra challenging.
Mm-hmm. I liked the one that you pointed out too about starting tasks can feel overwhelming. And I think when it comes to homeschooling, we see that a lot where people say, I asked them to do X, Y, and Z, and it didn't get done. And there's this extreme frustration about that. And there could be a whole variety of reasons with that. But sometimes it's that thing of like, just taking that first step feels like you're jumping the Grand Canyon. Once you take that first step, it's like, okay, I've got this. But that first step can feel absolutely monumental, or it can be challenging to identify what the first step is. Like, I have this big nut to crack. Where do I even start? What do you do first? And so there's a lot of ways that these things play out in the world of homeschooling. And we really just kind of have to step back and, like, in that case, think like, well, what were the instructions that I gave? What support was there? What sort of task breakdown was there in order to take this big nut and make it into smaller pieces? So there's definitely a lot going on there when we're homeschooling our amazing ADHDers. So we touched on it a little bit before about some myths when it comes to ADHD. Oh my, right? Like they just need more discipline. I just saw something about that the other day where somebody was saying like, I can't get my kid to do any schoolwork. And they kind of went into some examples. And then they said, well, they're a totally different kid when they're playing Minecraft or they're riding their 4-wheelers or they're doing this or they're doing that. And I'm like, well, yeah, because they enjoy those things, right? So there's no reason that you can't enjoy learning too. There's ways to make it work. And so perhaps there are ways that you could change it up and get them their content and get them to engage in a way that works better for their brain wiring. But the number of comments below that were like, well, you don't do your work, then you don't 4-wheel, right? You know, and I get that there's a piece of that too. There's a piece of reality, like first this and then this. But that kind of nibbled at me as far as that, like, they need more discipline thing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, why don't we figure out what's happening there? Because the reality is ADHD is hugely fed by the dopamine response in the brain. And so when kids are playing video games, when kids are doing a high energy activity like 4-wheeling or something like that, the dopamine feedback is huge. And it's like this, like the floodgates open and then they're feeling amazing and they're not getting that dopamine feedback when you're doing schoolwork a certain way. So how can we get that dopamine response and get that chemical reaction going when they're doing other things as well is really what it boils down to. Discipline, not so much. Dopamine, yes, lots of that. Okay. Not to say you should never discipline your kids, but that's not going to be the sole solution when it comes to getting an ADHD kiddo to be on board with doing something that they might not necessarily otherwise be on board with. Another one is like they can focus when they want to. Well, yeah, that's kind of true, right? I mean, Amanda said it. They're amazing at focusing on stuff that they're into. And I mean, to an extent, I think a lot of people are like that. But for ADHDers, it's like so much more extreme, that ability to hyperfixate on something that's interesting. And then the complete paralysis when it comes to stuff that is not interesting. So for me, I kind of likened it to a person who has dementia or Alzheimer's. Would you say, oh, well, if they really wanted to, they'd remember who I was? Like, no, they're not going to, right? Because that's their neurological state. And this is very much similar to that in the sense that you can't override the physical of the brain. It's not a matter of willpower in this case. I think I'm living proof of the next one that you will not grow out of ADHD. Right? we all have plenty of adult relatives who are at Thanksgiving dinner shaking their leg under the table like this because they have to sit through dinner and it's like, right? You know, and their leg is tapping on the floor, or somebody in a meeting who's flapping their pencil between their fingers and it's like tap, right? No, this is all the same thing. It's just a different manifestation of it as adults, but it's brain wiring. Your brain will not magically rewire itself when you graduate from high school or college or whatever the case might be. And then I think one of the last ones is that it's overdiagnosed. And so there's probably a little bit of something to that. I don't necessarily say overdiagnosed, but misdiagnosed sometimes or misunderstood. And we see this a lot, especially in younger boys, early elementary boys, that they can't sit still in school. And so there's this knee-jerk reaction to diagnose with ADHD and explore medication perhaps and all of that. And I'm not anti-medication. I'll put that out there right now. But a lot of times the thought process really might be, are they in an environment that's causing them to behave that way? And that environment might be a classroom. It's really hard for a 6-year-old boy to sit still for 6 hours in a day with minimal breaks and minimal engagement. That doesn't necessarily mean that's his neurological wiring. That's just being a 6-year-old boy. But in the US, there's not a lot of room for being a 6-year-old boy in the school system, in the traditional setting. And so sometimes I wonder if some of those kids end up kind of getting lumped in with our ADHDers, but not to say that it's all, but I definitely think we're seeing more diagnoses now, but we're understanding it better. We're able to identify it better. We're screening better. And so, yeah, you're seeing more. I don't know that that necessarily means overdiagnosed though.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the kind of the struggles with it is there are some categories or, for people who don't know, kind of like buckets that you can be diagnosed in, but there isn't a great way to diagnose the fact that it's a spectrum as well. With almost anything that you can be diagnosed with, it's a spectrum of how much it impacts your life.
Mm-hmm.
And, because there's not a way to really easily and clearly identify that, it might feel like, oh, well, it's being overdiagnosed. When in reality, well, sure, this person does have ADHD, but maybe they don't need medication to be able to function well. And in the past, we would have just been like, oh, that's a really fidgety person, the person who's always shaking their leg during the meeting and at the table. Well, no, now we understand that does mean, that doesn't automatically mean they have ADHD. But in this example, right? Like, okay, so they have ADHD, but it's not to the point where they can't do the things they want to be able to do and achieve and accomplish without medication. Whereas on the other end of it, you'd absolutely have kids and adults who are like, man, my life completely changed once I started medication, right? I'm so much happier. I'm so much more able to be the person that I want to be and the person that I always knew I was, but I just couldn't get there. And I think it makes it hard. We have all kinds of illnesses that have stages and that we know, like, well, you need this kind of treatment for this. And at this stage, you need this kind of treatment and those kinds of, but we don't really have that with a lot of these neurodivergent kind of diagnoses that we have these days. And so I think that's a big part of what makes people just automatically, oh, well, it's overdiagnosed. There's so much more of it. Like, oh, it's, well, no, we've got some work to do there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is going to surprise absolutely no one who is a regular listener of the podcast. But for me, whenever I'm trying to brainstorm a better way of doing something that's related to ADHD or really any learning difference, I personally like to go to understood.org. And so, for anyone who's not familiar with it, their kind of tagline is that Understood is the leading nonprofit empowering the 70 million people with learning and thinking differences in the United States. And they have this amazing website. I'm not going to say that it's the be all end all because it's definitely geared towards accommodations in like the classroom and maybe to a lesser extent workplaces. But I think it's a great place to like jump off because I'm not a big believer in reinventing the wheel, right? Like someone already came up with the wheel. So let's look at what they've got and see where we can make improvements or where we can change it to work better for our specific purposes. And the thing is, they have all of these recommendations, but they recommend them because they do help in certain situations for certain people. And so again, I like looking at their suggestions and using it as this like jumping off point. What ways might this apply at home? And sometimes more importantly, what expectations do I need to let go of to help my kiddo succeed? Right. I think one of the areas that grown-ups in this situation most need to kind of deschool on and let go of their baggage around is these areas of like environmental hacks, right? So we're talking about learning hacks, but the environmental things, those are the kinds of things that us adults, as the grown-ups in the room, can struggle with the most, right? Like this idea of making sure that we create movement friendly setups. Megan kind of mentioned that with like the 6-year-old boys who are told to, start school and sit down and you're going to sit all day and stop moving around and stop jumping. And, we don't run at recess and all of these kinds of things. Like we have to let go of this idea that kids need to sit down at a desk to be learning. That's not necessarily true. Kids can really benefit from things like standing desks. Or I know Megan's kiddo absolutely loves having like a bicycle seat at his desk. So when he has to be sitting at his desk working on things, he can still be moving in a way that really helps him move. There are wiggle cushions. We definitely have one in our home as one of the many seating options. Just the movement, the kind of the constant adjusting and sorting yourself out that way, it can help certain kiddos and adults, right? I mean, there was a while back, I'm not sure if they're still so popular, but a while back there was those exercise balls that everyone was using as like an office desk to help with your core. But it helped a lot of folks who also had ADHD because it gave you that constant little movements and the adjusting, and your body is doing something else that when your body is doing these other things, it actually helps your mind focus on what you need to focus on. Not for everyone, but it can certainly help for some folks. Trampolines are another one of those things, right? Don't tell your insurance agent that we're recommending it, but they are not necessarily distractions. There are certain kids, the trampolines and working on trampolines are huge. I've 100% heard stories of kids who struggled and struggled and struggled with memorizing their addition or multiplication tables. And then the minute they started working on them while jumping on a trampoline, they totally got them. Like these are those kinds of things. We, as the adult in the room, we really like to hold on to these ideas of, well, school has to happen this way. Learning has to happen in a calm environment where you're sitting down and you're not moving and you're not tapping your pencil and you're not this and you're not that. Well, does it? Like, why do we feel that way? I would really encourage you, if you're listening to this, to really take a step back and like think through those things and see if how much that actually matters, right? And if maybe that's an area that you can let go of for your kiddos so that they can succeed, they can learn more successfully. Another one that I think, especially this day and age, is like a weird kind of challenging thing is the idea of a calm zone, a place to calm down and re-regulate. We have spent so many years being told about timeouts and then time ins and, all of these kinds of things. But for an ADHD kiddo, we are like really looking at needing to do more like the a place where you can go and regulate, regroup, and reset instead of it being seen as a punishment. Like, go sit over there, calm down. That doesn't feel like I want to support you so that we can get on the right track and we can re-regulate. This is more than just a time in, right? This is a conscious decision of like, hey, sometimes we really do have to take a step back and just have that time to sort it out. I think another way too, that especially again, the adults in the room, we need to be okay with the idea that kiddos can and probably should demonstrate understanding in things other than written assignments or long standardized tests, or even just any sort of written test, oral reports, posters, video presentations, just letting your kiddo teach you about whatever they're learning, like listening, actually really taking the time to listen to what they're sharing. And just, again, this idea that like you can demonstrate that you have learned things without it having to be a long, tedious writing assignment or a long test or anything like that. In your real life as an adult, I don't imagine that you have had to create a 5-page written assignment on something to prove that you knew what you were talking about with your boss or the team that you're leading. You did not have to sit down and do an online standardized test for 3 hours before you were allowed to give a presentation about something. We always hear this like, well, but we've got to prepare kids for the real world. Okay, great. So let them give an oral report. Let them put together a PowerPoint presentation or a slideshow of some sort. These are great ways that will help them, but also do the thing that we always talk about wanting to do, helping prepare them for what the real world might in fact look like these days.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing that really goes along with this, like that I think, again, the grownups, the caregivers that are listening really need to think about and let go, is the idea of like, make sure that you are giving credit for work done instead of taking away points or being frustrated about what isn't done, right? Like they didn't get it done on the timeline that you gave them, or they only got half of it done. And so, they don't get credit for any of it. If you're homeschooling, especially if you're homeschooling, but even if you've got a kiddo in brick and mortar, like understanding that what got finished is what you need to be looking. Did they get it? This part of it, because the vast majority of the time, not always, right? But the vast majority of the time, if they got bored with it and they already showed you that they knew how to do it, they're not going to focus on the rest of the assignment. But why do you need them to just keep repeating and like, I still know how to do it. Yep, I still know how to do it. Yep, here's another problem that shows that I still know how to do it. Like, focus on did they get it? Do they understand it? Okay, that's what we're going for. Not, did they finish the entire assignment?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're perfectly describing one of my big pet peeves from our school days. My oldest child is hyperlexic. And so at 7 years old, he was reading Ridiculousness and had the highest reading score in the entire county and out of any K-5 student, which was a huge county and all of that, right? And so on Monday, the teacher would give a pre-spelling test and she would throw words out. Kids would spell them. Based upon how you did on the pre-spelling test, you got your list of words to work on for the week. Every day there was spelling homework and there was this menu in this spelling book that you had, and you had to pick from like, write each word using opposite colors. So like you would pick 2 colors like red and blue, and you'd write recipe in what are in one color, E in the other color, C in the other color. And that switching back and forth between pencils was supposed to sink the word into your brain. And there was a whole menu of this stupidity that was out there. And I was like, but the kid got 100 on Monday on the pre-spelling test. Why? Why are we doing this every day? And it's just like, it's that questioning of things. And I am a questioner of things, which caused me a lot of problems in the public school system. But it's that thing. If he's already proven to you he can do it, why are we doing all this ridiculous homework when he could be in the park? You've kept him inside for 6 hours. He wants to go to the park and climb trees. Let him go to the park and climb trees. He can spell. He's fine. He's hyperlexic. He's fine. Right? So yeah, it's that thing. But, in the school system, it was like, well, because this is how we do it. We do the pre-test on Monday and then you do the menu of options. And I was like, so if you're in that mindset of like pre-test is Monday, menu of options, final test on Friday, and you're butting heads with your ADHDer, that could be why, right? It's like to start to break some of those things down a little bit because they don't work that
Well,
way a lot
yeah,
of times.
exactly. And that's an excellent example. As the aggressive academic homeschooler, I'm going to say there's research behind the idea, not necessarily changing colors per letter, but of using different colors for different words and different textures and the feel, and how for certain learners that does trigger
Yeah.
a memory. And that's great. If that works for your kiddo, this is one of those things. Wonderful, fantastic.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work for your kiddo, or if you're in this situation where it's like, well, he doesn't really need it, but this is what the curriculum says, like, don't.
Yeah.
Like, if he doesn't need it, he doesn't need it. If he doesn't really need it, then he actually doesn't need it. And you don't need to enforce it. Like, let it go. This is one of those things, right? So much of the learning hacks. There are some things that are like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that, or we should do that. But so much of all of the learning hacks we're going to share are really about the grown-up letting things go and just embracing who their kid is and what they can actually do, and supporting that.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. All right, so we have some more stuff on the topic. Super excited to discuss things about culture, scheduling, all that jazz. But we wanted to remind anyone who is new to the podcast that we offer homeschool coaching. So we will drop a link in our show notes below. If you're catching this clip on social media, send us a DM and we'll get you there. But we offer personalized coaching sessions on everything from navigating the California charter system, that's Amanda's jam, to choosing the right curriculum for your learner, that's also Amanda's jam, to building a hack school transcript, that's me, cutting the cord to traditional education and taking the leap into unschooling, me. So yeah, you name it, between us, we can help. So we do sessions individually with parents. Sometimes parents are a little bit unsure and they're kind of looking to mix together a bunch of styles. And so then we'll do sessions together with parents. But for me, that's some of the favorite work that we do. I love all of it, but like, I love it when we get to do that because we get really good ideas going. And then when we hear back from parents who are like, it worked, that thing worked, I'm like, yes, right. It's pretty exciting. So yeah, so come hang out with us. We would love to brainstorm things that are just so super specific to you that it goes beyond kind of the higher level stuff that we talk about in the podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you've mentioned it before, but I think we both agree, right, that it's the strength of our partnership, right, is with me being so far on one end of academic aggressive homeschooling and you being on the other end with this loosey-goosey unschooling. Like, we really have just about everybody's bases covered, right? So whether you're at one end or the other end or somewhere in the middle and you want to pick and choose between kind of both of our styles, you know, we have it covered and we can totally help you. So definitely schedule a session anytime you need some help making decisions, when you're doubting whether or not you're doing the right thing, when you're like, oh my God, I've done the wrong thing, I'm certain of it. We can help you retool if you need, or we can just reassure you that you're doing an amazing job, because the vast majority of the time you are totally on the right track. And maybe we can help you come up with some tweaks, but for the most part, you are totally doing it. And we are just here to help and support as much as possible.
A little tweaking, a little refining, a little group brainstorming. It's all good stuff.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, so let's get into some learning hacks. Some of these are really big in my house. Sometimes some of the learning hacks, some might work for your kiddo, others might not, right? Every kid is different. Can I just say, can I soapbox for like 35 seconds? Like, the number of posts, and I get it, people are new and they're learning and you have to start somewhere, right? So I totally get it. But the number of posts that are like, is there a curriculum that's good for an autistic kiddo, an ADHD, and I'm like, they're individuals. It's just like anything else. There's characteristic traits that kind of go across the spectrum of people who are autistic or who are diagnosed with ADHD, who are dyslexic, but they're still individuals. You can't take 100 of them and apply the same thing to all 100 kids and expect them to all come out with this amazing experience. And so it's like, so some of the hacks might work for some kids, some might not, but you have to, that's parenting, right? You try things, you tweak, you refine. It works for a while. It stops working. Those are the worst, right? Like, man, we were on such a roll and then it stopped working. But yeah. So first up, multisensory is magic. The more sensory input that you can get going on, the better in a lot of cases for a lot of ADHD kiddos. So what does that look like? When they're young, it looks like it being super duper tactile, letting them do spelling words and shaving cream on a cookie sheet, sand on a cookie sheet, all that kind of stuff. The mess is killing. Like I'm starting to sweat thinking about how messy that would all be. But yes, it's a good idea. I will get over it. Okay. Right. And it's not like you just trying to be like the Pinterest parent. There's a reason why these suggestions are out there and why they're so prolific is because oftentimes they work. People who make letters out of sandpaper, cut them into strips and kind of make a letter board or a little booklet with all the different letters made out of sandpaper so kiddo can touch them. That tactile input is massive, especially when we talk about dopamine release and stuff like that. It's huge. Amanda mentioned my kiddo and his wobble board and his bicycle seat and all that kind of, a spinning chair. You give my kid a spinning chair, like at the doctor's office, the stool that spins and raises and lowers. And it's like always a joke. I'm like, did you go to medical school? You're going to have to turn that over to the doctor. That is his ultimate sensory input. He loves those. Fidget toys, huge. We have an entire bowl of fidget toys on kiddo's desk and he's got his favorites and he'll burn out on one and switch to another one. There's one that he pretty much always has with him. So yeah, fidgets are popular for a reason. Another one that people don't talk about as much, but gum chewing is a huge sensory input. and it's as long as you can tolerate the occasional bubble blowing and the sometimes chewing like a cow because they forget and it just starts happening and you're like, could you not? But gum chewing is a huge sensory input. It's a big OT suggestion for SPD kiddos, for ADHDers. And so if you can get some gum that meets your dietary standards as far as, I know sugar-free, but then they put other crap in it and whatever, but find something that works for your kiddo because that can be a really good one as well. Another thing are micro lessons. If you are expecting, especially a young kid, to sit down for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, you will end up posting in a Facebook group about how frustrated you are that your kid can't stay focused. And we will sit there and be like, how old are they? And you'll say they're 6 and they have ADHD. And we'll be like, well, then that's the problem, right? It's just too long. It's way too long. So a quick 10-minute thing. There's also a dopamine reaction to racing and having that moment of like, we have to get to the finish line. So something like, do you think we could do this in 10 minutes or less? Oh, you've just totally initiated the ADHD brain when you're like, I'm setting a timer. Let's race the clock. Huge. And that could be for things like cleaning your room or folding your laundry and stuff like that as well. Showering, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a break. And the break is the next level of reward after the dopamine of the activity. The break is it's something that they love. It's something that they enjoy. All that. And it's the reward for having accomplished the thing that you just set out to accomplish. What better feeling than that? Love it. Gamifying things. There's a reason why kids love these games, right? There's a lot of stimulation to them. There's rewards in them. It's very psychological, the way that they kind of infiltrate a kid's minds. So why don't we use that to our advantage and do the same thing? We can gamify things. We can, if your kid loves playing games, fine. Find a game that does multiplication in games. Find a game that does spelling in a fun way. The point systems, I will race a point system like nobody's business, right? And there's no prize, there's no anything. It's that thing. It's that validation of having done it. So point systems are tremendous. And, you can create it and make it silly and let them get into it, which is really, really fun. The other one that we've talked about before is a little bit different and super duper fun, is to let a kiddo teach you. Let them figure it out. Let them puzzle it out. Let them do the research. When they get stuck, let them find the answer. And then in the end, have them teach you something, because there's a defensiveness sometimes when it comes to like, we're going to sit down and I'm going to teach you this, but explain this to me. Oh, well, now I've been given a challenge. Now I've been given a task. I'm in. Let me figure this out. Let's do this. And so it's just a little bit of a different way of approaching having it done. If somebody can teach you something, that's one of the most powerful forms of understanding that there is. We've talked about that. You can know how to do something, but to be able to teach someone else how to do something is oftentimes a deeper level of understanding than just knowing how to do it yourself, because you have to be able to break it down and explain it differently, which is a great skill, a great skill. So there's some really good stuff out there. It doesn't have to look like you think it has to look like. Change it up.
Yeah, that's it. If you are homeschooling or you're thinking about homeschooling and you're listening to this episode, we cannot stress enough the importance of going back in our queue and looking for the episode on deschooling. Go look at it, give it a listen, because so much of what we're talking about is this fundamental, like, take the time to really think about whether or not learning has to look the way you think it has to look. And as soon as you let go of a lot of those shoulds and those expectations, you can start implementing these things and actually really enjoy learning. Your kiddo can have fun. You guys can get on the same page. I truly like just it's hard. It's hard to let go of those expectations. We all do it. I would think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's like, oh no, I don't try to live up to anyone's expectations ever at all. It never occurred to me. Everyone has some place, some part in their life where the shoulds kind of get the best of them from time to time. But if you can let go of that, you can really start implementing a lot of these things. So another thing that we just want to quickly highlight and talk about, right? This idea of the importance of emotional regulation and supporting executive function, because these things are going to be so important in helping out in this situation. So that idea of start with connection, right? Regulation comes before education. We've talked about it in other episodes. If a kid is always in fight or flight, if they're always dysregulated, if they're always anxious, their brain is not settled and open to learning. They are not going to be able to learn the way that they want to, the way that you want them to. So you really have to work on this creating a partnership and just like healthy regulation in your home between you and the kiddo that you're helping out here. And one of the important things to remember with this, and again, we've talked about this so many times, but if you're just picking up this episode or you need a reminder, or you're going to send this to your parenting partner or a relative that helps out a lot, meltdowns are not bad behavior. Meltdowns are a kiddo trying to articulate in the best way they can that they are completely overwhelmed, right? They might not have the words for it. They might not be in a place to be able to use all of the words for it. Maybe eventually they will have the words for what got them there, but a meltdown is it's their way of telling you that something is really off the rails. And as the grown up in the room, you need to understand that it's not bad behavior, and you need to be able to help them calm down and re-regulate and just settle so that you can move forward in a more healthy way. And a huge part of that is going to be this idea that like just more general widespread regulation if possible, right? Coming home, bringing your kiddo home, especially if they've been in public school or in any kind of brick and mortar school and they're struggling with constant dysregulation, bringing them home is the first step. And then really like working to create just this trust and this environment where they're allowed to step out of fight or flight and they're allowed to just exist as who they are and be embraced fully for who they are, so that then you can kind of take that next step. It's going to be so important, especially for those differently wired kiddos. Something that's a little bit more tangible and easier, you're like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to get them out of fight or flight. Something that you can for sure implement that helps with like executive function stuff is to use things like checklists. And it might be something where they actually check it off. It might be on a whiteboard where they get to erase it when they're done. But we talked before about creating these small chunks and giving, really small tasks and helping them figure things out. Then put it in something where they can check it off or erase it and they feel that dopamine rush, like, oh, I finished that. I don't know anyone who is like, oh no, I don't want to mark off my to-do list. I love my to-do list all being there staring at me in the face. It feels good to be able to take something off of your list. Give that to your kiddo in small chunks so that they can do that. The more they can do it, the more they're going to be encouraged to continue working at it and to strive for getting through the list. You can use things like visual cues. a lot of people like to do like signs or kind of poster things that have pictures or little things like that that you can work with. There are ones that are for younger kiddos and older kiddos. The internet is full of options and ideas and suggestions. Another one that I know is really helpful in our home is visual timers. So you can get just like a regular digital timer if that works for you, fine. I know my kiddo really does well with the visual one that kind of counts down. So it's a color. I think his is blue. He's got one that's blue and one that's rainbow, actually. And it counts down. So you set it for 5 or 10 minutes or however long the task is. And then they can see that they're getting closer and closer to it being done. And it's just a really, again, multi-sensory. They know how to read a clock and it's going to buzz when it's done. But the visual color changing can really help certain kiddos. And another thing that I think we all know is important, but sometimes we forget to actually do, is just this idea of normalizing starting over. We talk about emotional regulation and how to support executive function and all of these kinds of things. But how often do we make sure that we are modeling this, like, you know what, that didn't work. Let's try again. You know what? This is completely fallen apart and it's not at all what we wanted to achieve. So, you know what? Let's take a step back. Let's take a break and let's come back in 15 minutes and try again. There's so much that, I mean, truly normalizing this and saying, it's okay. It didn't work. We're going to try again. It's a parenting superpower. It's a caregiver knockout, right? Like, this is the thing. You want to be able to do that and teach your kids that it's okay, right? Because the things that we model now are the things they're going to do as adults. So work on it. Even if you didn't get that when you were growing up, if no one in your family ever said, oh boy, this went to hell in a handbasket, let's try again. It's okay, right? We're all working to be better. Every generation tries to do better and be better. But this is your chance to really model some of these like really positive things. And it's extra, extra important for those kiddos who are differently wired and are just navigating the world a little bit differently.
Yeah, I know for one of my kiddos that everything is bigger. Everything is just much, 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 much bigger, much more heightened. Every sensation, every emotion, all of that stuff. And so when something doesn't work out, there's a fear of, maybe not a fear. There's a huge letdown. There's maybe a feeling that they've caused someone else an issue by not succeeding, that someone is disappointed in them for not succeeding. And the reaction can just be absolutely massive. And so like even just something like that kiddo has an ARFID diagnosis, which is a food restriction. And, we'll be traveling or we'll be out somewhere and I'll say, why don't you get this thing? And I will literally start off by saying, if you don't like it, even though I paid for it, it's okay. You don't have to eat it. And I won't be at all upset if you try it and it doesn't work out for you. It's totally okay. But why don't we do that thing? And so there has to be every time. And I'm a gentle parent. I'm not a yeller. I've never been like, you'll sit at this table until that plate is clean. Like so it's not like it's those thoughts and feelings are there as a result of the environment that he lives in. That's there because of how his brain works. And so I have to be super aware of the fact that those emotions are happening and kind of get out in front of them. The other thing that I was thinking when you were talking about checking things off for that same kiddo, the checking things off helps with memory issues because they're huge for him. He likes to joke that he's like a goldfish with amnesia. For any Ted Lasso fans out there, you'll get the goldfish reference. But so he'll do things like he'll make dog biscuits for his service dog, or he'll make banana bread, which is one of his chosen foods. And I would write out the recipe for him. And then he would look in the bowl and he'd be like, well, there's wet stuff in there, but I don't know what stuff that is. Is it egg? Is it oiled? And like, I can see the egg because there's a yolk, but is that clear stuff? Is that oil or is that part of the egg? Did I add this? Did I add that? He has no clue, even though he's just done it. And so having that checkbox allows him to also keep track of what he has and has not done, because a lot of times he can't remember. And then when he can't remember, he gets frustrated or he gets down on himself or he gets he kind of spirals and he doesn't know what to do. So having that there, not only do I totally agree on the dopamine rush of crossing things off your to-do list, but it can also just help you go, I mean, I'll literally be out sometimes and I'll run my tongue across my teeth. I'll be like, yeah, I did. I brushed my teeth. Like you do some things sometimes and you can't even remember it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I brushed my teeth. Did I brush my teeth? So sometimes having those things there as kind of just a support structure is super duper helpful.
Well, yeah. And if you have an older kiddo, I don't know if you remember the name of it, but I know that there is an app out there that can make it really easy for you to be able to put like your daily tasks that you like check off or those kinds of things, right? A friend of ours uses it. And so I remember her talking about how helpful it was for her. But there are lots of options, right? If you've got a kiddo who's like, I don't want your paper in a sleeve so that I can use the reusable marker. Like I've grown up, mom, like that's really lame. There are other options, right? And it keeps that same idea. So yeah, don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like I said, this could be an entire series, but we really just wanted to give you some ideas, right? And kind of start this process, get you thinking about it. And hopefully you found something interesting in here. We are wrapping up. Before we totally wrap up, we did just want to kind of do a little PSA. If you have been listening to our podcast for a while, you know that we had a big, very active Facebook group. What you probably don't know is that moderating such a large, active group kind of ended up like taking over our lives. And by kind of, I mean it totally did, right?
Yeah.
We were spending so many hours every day, literally every day, 7 days a week, managing the group. And so we have paused the group for the foreseeable future. And we've decided to focus on building community over on Patreon, where we already had a group going over there and we can offer more like virtual live meetings and support without having to spend quite as much time on the day-to-day moderation that the Facebook group was requiring. So if you're a member of our Facebook group, please come join us on Patreon. There's a free option. You join as a free member and you'll still get regular updates and things like that. And then there are also several paid membership levels that gives all sorts of different things from unit studies to the live meetings to like weekly live meetings. There's just a wide variety to meet everyone's needs. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you over there.
Yeah, we definitely do. We've got some great stuff coming up. I'm super pumped about it.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, we hope you took something away from today's episode. We'd love to continue the conversation. We have a neurodivergent parenting meeting over on Patreon. So come hang out. We'll chat ADHD all day long. It is my all day, everyday existence. So come hang out. Let's chat. So we like to end each episode with a mantra. And today's mantra is connection over perfection. Flexibility is a strength. Progress, like your child's education, is never a one-size-fits-all situation. So I think that's it. Just keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. I had a visual before, Amanda, while you were talking and you were saying about like questioning things and stuff. I kind of had this visual of like, if you're just starting your homeschooling journey or you're trying to retool your homeschool journey, visualize it as an empty box. And before you put anything in the box, do like the Marie Kondo. Does this serve my child? Will this spark joy in our homeschooling life? Like before you put something in there, because otherwise, I think it's so easy to just put something in there because you think it belongs there or because that's how your education was or it worked for your older kids or whatever the case is, right? But really being so mindful about each thing that goes into that box that's going to be your vehicle for your journey and making sure that it serves you, serves your kiddo, serves the long-term goals before you keep going. So I love it. And we hope you have an awesome rest of your day and happy homeschooling.
Yeah. Have a great one.